doesn't override those.
Is all set?
Sir Tosh, we are recording and everybody is muted except you, so I think you're good to go.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sir Gaius Tascius Severus Fabianus, and I'm generally known as Sir Tash. I'm the newly deputized Marshal for Steel Fighting within the SCA in Atlantia. The SCA has newly adopted our steel fighting rules that allow you to use an actual weapon upon the field that is in every respect the duplicate of the kind of weapons that were actually used in medieval tournament. They're rebated, they're not, which means not sharpened, but otherwise have the feel and characteristics of a sword because they're a sword. In that way, they inform our rattan fighting, because rattan fighting is meant to duplicate or be a model of a sword. We're going to use an actual sword. And it's kind of hard to deny the validity of that. If you're an average tourist in a crowd and you see someone swinging a sword, you immediately get that this is combat with a sword. We have chosen the King Rene rules of the 1400s because those rules were adopted to stop people from dying in tournaments. A pope had in the 1200s declared anyone who died in the tournament damned, and tournaments were still happening, people were still dying, and so various rules were made, such as not being able to strike a man who was no longer wearing his helmet, not striking a man upon the ground, and most importantly for us, not using the point of the weapon or the pommel, because these were techniques that actually did kill people. All of you who talk about half sorting, we're not doing half sorting for that very reason, because they were battlefield techniques that had performance value on a battlefield. We're doing something safer, but something that still requires skill, as we're going to have judges counting the blows made one opponent upon the other in such a way that force will be used. We're requiring a person to use 3 joints within their blow so that the form of the blow is actually done in a forceful way. Now, if you're curious about our rules, you can look up the King Rene rules yourself. You'll find that the majority of the King Rene rules are actually dealing with the pageantry of the event. They're very formalized ways that the judges come upon the field, the contestants come upon the field, display their helmets. The whole point of this pageant was it was a show. It was a form of entertainment that also involved skilled fighting. We're going to be using the same type of judging for judges that are determining how many blows components the opponents are making upon each other. By doing this kind of judging, we are taking away the ability to just pummel into submission by virtue of we're no longer rewarding the power of the blow, the actual power of the blow. Doesn't mean you can't throw a powerful blow. It's just that you're not going to be rewarded for hitting a person especially hard, especially if that person gets 2 faster blows in while you have your 1 amazing blow. So we are going to be basically putting a value on the skills and speed of a person, but our judges will be trained to show and know what a good blow looks like. In other words, involving 3 joints of motion. We have spent quite a bit of time making our rule set, and I encourage you to go over and look at that rule set and see how we have made something that'll allow people to fight in a relatively safe way. Rattan actually hits harder than steel weapons because steel tends to skip off of metal and rattan tends to conform to what it hits. But you don't want to be hit by a steel weapon on a portion of your anatomy that isn't covered by some metal. So obviously we're requiring better armor than you would have had for rattan fighting. And we're also requiring a certain amount of appearance because we are putting such emphasis on display. This is something for the crowd to appreciate. Oftentimes the crowd will actually be judging the combat. And so we are looking for that tournament atmosphere. And in a way, this gets back to the roots of the SCA as the original SCA came out of a backyard tournament. I encourage you all to try this out, hunt us up and look into it. Please ask for advice before you buy any equipment, as our equipment rules are stringent out of necessity. I encourage and hope to see you upon the field. Thank you for watching. Okay, that's it. That's our intro.
All right. Well, Greg, or Tosh, is there anything you want to touch on specifically within that? Whether it's the advice you would give people when they reach out about those armor requirements or concerns they may have?
Yeah, we're going to have to make a juried list of merchants. I've started that. I actually have a list that I've made on my phone that I'm hoping to, publish. But one of the hardest things has always been finding armorers that we can trust that actually deliver the products we need.
So I'll ask a question. How I'm assuming there's going to have to be a judge certification, similar to being a marshal. How's
Yes.
that going to?
Yeah, well, we're going to be essentially going through, I'm hearing some extra voices. We're going to be going through a training process where you're going to be an apprentice judge. You're going to be counting blows. And we're going to see how your blows compare to other people. One of our plans during this downtime is we're going to shoot some video, or we actually have some video shot already. We're going to ask people to judge those fights. Watch the video from the viewpoint of the camera. Judge the fight. How would you judge those blows? How many were good? How many were bad? And we can get a good comparison list going. What we have found is judges, as they train, very, very rapidly zero in on some commonalities. We've had numbers that were way off, and within 3 fights, people are within 2 blows of each other in counting wise. So we find that that system works pretty well, where people are comparing with experienced judges and quickly gain an eye for this. The system we're using is involving 3 joints. If we go to our Armored Combat page, the authorizations after that, we have armor standards, and we also have what is involved in a blow. We also have helmet rules, all the various rules you need. I encourage you to go to these pages. But one of the more important parts in that page is how we're judging a blow, and you'll find 3 joints is involved. It's where you are, it's where 3 joints are involved in delivering the blow. And we actually do have a video on that.
So this is a pretty big disconnect from what people are used to with standard SCA heavy combat, rattan combat. In that A, it is judged, and B, that the blow is judged on an externally viewable factor and not blow force necessarily, right? Is there any opinions or lessons you'd like to share on those topics for the folks who are coming into this with a heavy fighting background?
Well, what we quickly found out is, by virtue of the armor working, it's actually very difficult to judge a blow that hits you, say, on the thigh. Not quite sure what I'm hearing here. Anyway, it's very hard to judge if the blow is good or not because the armor works so well, and it has to work really well. You really can't have leather on your arm and be hit on an arm a good blow and find your bone broken. So you've got a metal vambrace with some padding, and the metal vambrace does its job remarkably well because steel, when it hits a steel surface, delivers a little force, and then very quickly, if there's any component of angle in that shot, very quickly skims off. You have to have a precise 90-degree hit on a piece of steel armor to really drive force into that armor. Anything out of that, and you're wasting some of that power in just skipping off of the metal. So by virtue of that, it's actually very, very difficult to judge blow quality personally. We found ourselves misjudging shots to the head all the time. For example, we're using very heavy helmets. So it's just a different form of combat. Rattan it's a grass. It bends when it hits you. And because it bends, it conforms to whatever it's hitting and then drives that force into that portion of the anatomy. And by virtue of that, you can feel that force far better than a piece of metal that skips outward. Does that make sense?
Just as a comment, Tosh, your audio is super clear, and we've got everybody else muted. So if you're having any audio artifacts, it may be on your end.
I appreciate the clarification on why it is important to judge this sort of thing externally. So thanks. On the topic of the 3 joints involved, for folks who don't have a context, do you want to explain what a good blow using 3 joints would be? Like if that's elbow, shoulder, and hip, or what that means? And Tosh, you're muted, by the way.
Bonnie and Michael made a video that kind of demonstrates that. So probably the best thing to do is to queue up that video.
Okay. Does anybody have that video ready to present?
I'm working on it. It'll take a few seconds.
Okay, just want to make sure. Thanks.
So I'll fill the space with a couple of things. So basically, my assumption here is that these will be standalone, one-on-one, non-melee tournaments, right? I mean, I think it's an interesting concept. I'm wondering do we see 4, 5, 6 years later this moving into other things? Will people take this for crown versus rattan, or what do we think?
This is all Rick. Well, Greg's bringing that up. Oh, looks like he's got it. We can go back to that in just a minute.
About blow quality in steel fighting within the SCA. What I mean by that is we are not going to be personally judging whether a blow is good when it hits us. The reason for this is quite simple. The steel armor works so well, the weapons tend to glance off just after contact, or the weapon's force is spread out by the armor such that it is actually pretty difficult to judge whether a blow is good or not, especially with the variety of different armors that are out there, some more effective than others. So by virtue of this, we're going to be using judges, which was done in period. In the King Renate rules, there are 4 judges. We have 4 judges, also 2 per fighter. And those judges are going to be looking at the fight, judging whether the blows are good or not, and using a clicker to count the number of blows that were considered good. Those will be tallied up at the end, and a winner declared based on those tallies. So what do we consider a good blow? If you go to our rule set, you're going to find that we have written out what determines a good blow, that you're hitting with the edge of the weapon, that the weapon was not impeded by the defensive measures of your opponent, that the blow is thrown with technique that would have been giving injury if you had not been wearing the protective gear and the weapons had not been dulled. We want to have at least 3 joints involved. Here we mention wrist, elbow, and shoulder. Certainly waist would be one of those joints. We want to have power development in a chain, not just a simple wrist flick. You have to have 2 hands on the sword. For example, a long sword especially, you need to be using the weapon the way it was meant to be used. By doing these techniques, our judges are going to be able to see your blow quality and reward that blow quality by giving you a point. You don't stop with one blow, you keep throwing blows until a certain prescribed time period is passed. When that time period is passed, judges tally up the votes, and we end up with a recorded vote, so to speak, of how good your fight was. We're now going to watch Inogen fighting against Duke Sir Michael. She's going to demonstrate what a good blow is. As you can see, she's using 3 joints. She's also using her waist. She's throwing with good development. The weapon is starting behind her head, and she throws with 3 joints. She's now going to demonstrate what we would consider poor development. You can see their hand is forward and she's just kind of flicking with her wrist. These are blows we would not count. Of course, she's going to be hitting her opponent more, but none of those opponents would be counted by our judges because there was not enough of a joint chain involved in delivering that blow. I'm hoping that makes some sense. It will kind of even the playing field out between larger people and smaller people, because the power of the blow is not going to get any more points than a blow delivered with enough technique that it would get the same scoring. So you can throw that mighty blow, that 1 in a million blow, it'll get a point. If you throw 3 blows faster with correct technique, you win that fight, even though you're only 90 pounds and your opponent's 250 pounds. I think this makes this a more competitive format for all body types within the SCA. And again, we're trying to sell the audience upon a visual fight that is showing skill, technique, and a kind of panache. This is a tournament in medieval style. Thank you for watching.
So Tosh, I think I've gotten a lot of feedback in my years of doing demos for SCA Heavy Combat, where the first question people say is, do you use real swords? This would be a really cool thing to show, folks. I think people really enjoy the idea of steel on steel, and the idea of inclusion based on technique and not necessarily the physical attributes that people are born with is a really good direction. So thanks for pointing that stuff out. I like it a lot.
Excellent. Good feedback. Again, this is a different sport. And I'm, earlier there was a question, is this going to replace Crown? I don't think it should. Crown is it is a top tier kind of event where you actually do want that really big guy or that really, really skilled guy who got that power blow. You actually kind of want that. You're looking for someone who is the warlord on the field. So this is a different thing. As I said, this is a medieval tournament. And if you look at the King Rene rules, they spend an incredible amount of time talking about the dressing, the window dressing of the judges, bring your helmets. This is a big show. This is the Olympics of its day. And the fighting was kind of just the actual performance. There was so much around it. And that's something I think the SCA can excel at. There are so many other groups that do steel fighting. There's very few other groups that have the tents, the people with all the outfits, the list field, the things you need to actually throw a medieval tournament that looks like a medieval tournament. And that's something I think the SCA has.
So on the topic of judging, I mean, I always try to focus on victory conditions, right? Convincing the judges that you're doing a good job is obviously, you mentioned technique. The actual method of judging, you mentioned clickers. Is this something akin to like a boxing match where the judges come to a conclusion and then it's shared with the combatants?
I think the best person to talk about this is actually Kel. If Kel wants to step in, she's been doing a lot of judging, and I think she can give you the best information in that regard.
Okay, so you're right. It is a lot like a boxing match as far as judging. These are the clickers that are used. So the judges click once for each point. And then currently how we're scoring is at the end of the tournament, the head judge or somebody taking that role is going through and getting the score from all 4 judges. Frequently we see that the 2 judges that are judging the fighter come to a conclusion, and the other 2 judges that are judging the other fighter come to a close approximation of score. I think that answers your question. Leaving anything out?
No, I think you got it. But one clarification is that she's illustrating that in general, the judges that are scoring are within a couple of blows of each other, and obviously that'll be part of the training and evaluation of new judges. And during the collection of the scores, as seen, it's not going to be like it is for HMB and IMCF and the related country organizations. The judges will not confer on the score for a fighter. They are collected separately and evaluated by the head judge for the SCA. And this was after some consideration.
Yeah, the head judge and the head marshal of that event, not necessarily for the SCA, but for that event.
Yep.
And then if the judges need to talk, they can talk about why they came to the score, but really it usually boils down to they saw it from different angles, that's why their scores are different.
It's worth noting that the judges are going to be moving around the periphery of the field, maintaining angles so they can actually see. It's why we have 2 judges per person. That person is across the field, specifically identified. They are counting blows upon a person, not the blows a person threw. And they are going to maintain the angles they need, because some judges are not going to have the same angle as another. They're going to maintain the angles you need. And so between all of the scores, you end up with something that's kind of closer to the truth once it's all averaged out. One thing we're not doing is have the marshal be a judge, because the marshal has to actually pay attention to what's going on. And we have found very, very quickly, it is hard to concentrate on 2 things at once. If you're judging, it's actually pretty hard to do any marshaling, and vice versa, because your mind is kind of focused on this event. It's pretty easy for a judge to lose count. That's why Kel's talking about the clickers. If you're just keeping that count in your head and there's a really good shot, it just went to 0. You need that clicker.
Tosh, if I may, real quick though, the neat thing about having so many judges and marshals and the pageantry in the SCA is that we get to include a lot of folks in the play. It's not just the fighters anymore, but it's everybody playing together. Everybody has a role.
Absolutely. We're nowhere near as concerned about who the actual winner is. There are going to be events where the audience will judge who the winner is, and let's face it, that'll be more of a popularity contest than anyone else. We've already seen that happen, and that's not such a bad thing. We are providing a spectacle, and it's a spectacle that the audience can enjoy.
It sounded.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Klein.
So from my understanding, it sounds like you're going to have 2 combatants, and then you will have a marshal, and then a total of 4 judges per fight.
The timer.
That is
Plus
correct.
somebody doing timing.
But that's only for actual contests, so that wouldn't be required for, say, practice or anything of that sort.
No, not at all. And by the way, something I probably should have mentioned, I did to a bit, we're doing a European tournament. So we're expecting people to show up with European equipment. If you look at the rules, they mention no katanas very specifically. It's because it's just not a European weapon. Same with, a Madu or so on. We're looking at a European tournament, and we're restricting our armor and equipment to a European tournament because we're actually reflecting that. Now, when you're on your own, knock yourself out. I don't care if you're going to be fighting someone in your samurai armor, as long as your armor is correct, protective-wise. That doesn't bother me. It's just you're not going to be in the European tournament, and that's just the way it is. If we had enough people doing Japanese gear and they had a Japanese tournament, more power to them. But right now, we're doing European tournaments. And that's why we're talking about weapons and armor restrictions for that tournament. We have a certain quality of portrayal, and blue plastic pickle barrel isn't it.
I chuckled to myself about when you're on your own, knock yourself out. But I understand what you're saying.
Log. You can go ahead. Go ahead. Log.
It rolls downstairs and ones are in pairs. All right. Is there anything else that the group wants to outline for folks who don't have a context for what we're trying to do here? We've outlined, what this is, how this is different, and how it is a spectacle type of event, and how the armor is different. These are all excellent. Is it fun? You guys been having a good time with it?
Yeah.
It's absolutely fun. Especially, I have a heavy fighting background, but my head just got to the point where I could not take getting hit hard. And this, I don't have to worry about it at all.
So
And I love it.
So Bonnie, you and I have fought heavy fighting together a long time. Your technique there is great. Do you think that this is more fair as someone who is around 5 feet tall and, well, honestly, just smaller than me?
I mean, it evens that, like Tasha was saying earlier, it evens the kind of evens the playing field. But mostly for me, I'm not worried about getting hit. That's like,
I mean, skills are still important. You do need skill to win this, but the skills of a 90-pound person are not eliminated by the 250-pound person just being able to plow them into the ground.
When we were at Pennsic with this, and the Botan duels fighting female champion Tosh, she was fantastic. Her sword work was exceptional. Inogen's sword work, she's given several of us everything we want and then a little bit more. And there's obvious disparity in size there. They're, at 6 foot 210, 6 foot 250, big guys being able to throw people around the field. It's a little bit different when it's all sword counting, all blow counting, skills, the traditional skills. There was some cut and thrust discussion about, well, what about 133? What about, Fiore? What about Marazzo? Well, if you watch my fights, you'll see those things are present. It's just, this is a matter of application, not a matter of practice. We're actually doing the fighting with the steel. Thanks, Tosh.
So one of the other things I wanted to bring up is there something inherently, so when you watch SCA fighter, an SCA fight as a tourist, you come along, they're fighting with their tan, it's interesting, and then one of the guy goes to their knee because he's been hit, on his leg. And we almost always get that person asking, why did he go to his knee? Why is he kneeling on the ground? Oh, because he had his leg chopped off and he's pretending he doesn't have a leg anymore. And we kind of lose the audience right around that moment, right around the time when we say we're pretending this thing happened. Then people suddenly realize in their head, oh, this is pretend. They don't understand that there is actual skills going on, that there's actual blow happening, but we do lose our audience pretty quickly when they see that you're acting something out, and we get quickly thrown into the LARP pile. I'd like to show you a video I've got. It was an event that happened here in Maryland, and people paid money to go see me and some other people hit some people, which you gotta love that. If that there's an audience that has never seen this before and they're into this. I'll show you. So this crowd, I mean, there's a sizable little crowd.
Are you the timer?
I don't remember how much it was. Something like 5 or 50.
Well,
and
I started timing as soon as it started. They've been fighting for 30 seconds.
Of it, there's something just simply honest about the fact that these people are hitting each other.
When do I need to call it?
Making clangs and sparks shoot out. And the crowd is very much entertained and very much satisfied. And I think that's kind of important.
Yeah. So again, I've doing demos for years. When you get to the point where someone takes a leg off, like the Black Knight from Monty Python and the Holy Grail, you definitely get someone going, "Oh, okay." So I get it. It is to your point, an honest sort of demonstration of what you're trying to convey, and I mean the cool factor is high. I have to admit, the cool factor is high. Yeah, I don't have any other questions. If anybody else
So-
has questions, feel free, or any other comments.
This is all right. I got a little bit of a comment. To the point about what else is fun about this is it's a bit of a gut check. Standing out there swinging a sword for 60 seconds or more can really be a test of your endurance. And if it's a multiple round fight, like we did at Amir, standing back, getting back in there for that third fight, you're pretty much wore out. And Tosh will tell you he's played a mind game, kind of kicking back on the edge, looking like he's calm and collected and kind of rested to step back in is a part of it. So, you've got to be in a little better shape than you do than most folks do for regular rattan fighting. So there's that piece of it too, which is what I really like, is that I'm going to get out here and swing this sword for a minute, and I'm going to go back and do it 2 more times if we're doing a best of 3, and I've got to fight some other fighters as well. So it takes a little bit to say, I'm going to stand here no matter what and get through this.
Yeah, absolutely. The gas tank that's necessary to fight in this stuff is pretty amazing. It's demanding. There's a reason why there's 60-second time limits, 30-second time limits, because you do 3 of those in a row and you are drenched in sweat. And you're breathing your own CO2. That doesn't help either. And you're wearing extra padding. It gets pretty hot. No, it's amazingly different. And it will quickly motivate people.
So, not to have too much of a plug for other content, but Felix is teaching a strength and conditioning class that would be useful for anyone who's taking in this class. It talks about how you can train for those specific scenarios and what specific biological mechanisms are associated with that. So that's at 2:00 today. If anybody who's viewing this on the recording, they'll be recording that as well. I'm sure you guys are aware of Felix's work there, but hopefully it'll be helpful. I'm going to have to drop to get to the next facilitation of the next course, but I want to thank you guys for participating in Pennsic in the Backyard. And Klein, you can keep facilitating here and in the recording when everyone's finished asking their questions. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Billy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Billy. And Milton, you've been hanging out. What do you think?
You're on mute, Milton.
Hakan? Nope.
Does anyone else have any questions that we need to deal with? Or is there anything else anyone wants to mention that hasn't been mentioned yet?
One thing we didn't talk about yet was the list layout. Since we're pretty specific, it's actually laid out in the rules. Currently, we're working with a 20 by 20 or 25 by 25 fighting list, which is outlined by a chalk or paint line on the ground so fighters don't trip over it, with a 10-foot exclusion zone, which has to be a physical barrier of some kind, list fence, ropes and posts. The judges and marshals will stay within the exclusion zone. All other observers must be outside of the exclusion zone. And in general, we're going to put 2 lines about 3 feet apart in the center, which is where the fighters should be lining up. And at the end of the fight, we're going to be returning them to those spots while we get the judges' count. And if the fight has to stop.
I've got a graphic up if you wish to take a look, and you'll see the layout that's from the rules.
Yep. Note, fighting stops if someone crosses over the line for the list itself. The marshal should be calling a warning to the fighter so that they can adjust before they actually step outside, and generally they will. And Tosh mentioned that the judges are the only ones that score. The lead marshal does have latitude to add or subtract from the score based on the performance and activities of the fighters. For example, refusing to fight by either stepping outside of the list consistently or backing away from their opponent could be penalized a point for refusing to engage. Thanks, Tosh, for the diagram.
So, Jim, from a fencing perspective, what do you like about this compared to, as you know, fencers are using steel weapons also? What makes this different?
The because we are armored, our concern comes to we're equally armored, and I have and will present skills that I can do safely without the concern so much of injury. As you know, we've disallowed foining or the point in our game for the specific reason that it kills. It was removed from tournament because, well, nobody wanted to be excommunicate. So the rapier fighters will find in this that it's very easy to assimilate your footwork. It's very easy to assimilate the blade work. The blade work is done primarily by edge, but the intent is counting points, just like you do in rapier. And yeah, frankly, I don't want to kill my friends. They're hard to play with when they're dead, and that's illegal in many states. So I think that once people begin to see the efficiency of this game, much like the efficiency of rapier, that we're going to see more crossovers there because they get to play with steel swords in a different way.
So, as you were saying, if you're using a pointed weapon, what I was trying to show behind me, there's a helmet. It's an excellent helmet as far as helmets go. It's got pretty tight eye slots, and yet if I was thrusting, I would have almost no difficulty getting this into an eye slot. So here we go. As you can see, the sword just readily enters in, and this is a very bad day for the person who is fighting. So yeah, we're not doing thrusting because it's actually really, really difficult to make that safe.
Well, and when we were doing the testing and we were working with a variety of helmets, we found that it was really, really hard to accidentally thrust. I have nearly lost or lost points because I am a trained fencer. I will throw that Stichschlag. I will throw that thrusting blow. And it's been very hard, Ulrich will shake his head, for me to not thrust at the end of a pattern. 1, 2, 3, here comes the thrust. As well trained in 133, Marazzo, Fiore, all of the ones that are talking about the weapon used as a weapon of war, what we're seeing here is the ability to fight that carefully constructed, tactically minded fight and fence in a different manner. I'm really looking forward to the time that we start to see these swords, our long swords and arming swords, done at the fence where we have a barrier set up and we're either in a box where we cannot retreat from that, or we're holding on to the barrier and exchanging blows. I'm looking forward to those different aspects of those tourneys. It brings different tactical mindedness to a new game for us. Thanks, Greg.
So I would like to point out regarding those thrusts that Giacomo lined up, as well as a couple of other spots where we had somebody set into a thrusting position. What needed to happen happened exactly as it should. Everybody stopped and the hold was called almost immediately. So Giacomo realized at Holiday Fair when we were first starting with this, he dropped down to start a thrust. He stopped, I stopped, and leaned back a little bit, and the marshals all called hold immediately. So the risk of somebody moving to a thrust and continuing through is small at this point with the trained fighters we have been working with so far.
Is there anyone else who has a comment? Because I think we're close to the end of this otherwise. We're actually right at the 1 o'clock time.
No, I think that we have shown the diverse aspect of this. I think that we've shown how important our logistical tail is with Baroness Kell there, and how we need that support for the entire SCA to have the pageantry and the fun of this. As we developed this, we learned more and more that we're just so inclusive and the fun is so much prevalent. I guess that would be the only thing I have left to say.
I thought I'd mention, it's almost a plug, but Nadler is the most reliable purveyor of equipment pretty much in the United States. He will have it in your hands within a week. And he's recently gotten some new stuff in to the point where I think he's already sold out of the Sabatons he had. There were some full case greaves at a pretty reasonable price. Case greaves tend to be pretty expensive. He's got some excellent equipment, and I'm told that he's going to be having a large number of relatively low-cost helmets in the very near future. The great thing about Nadler is he's very, very thorough about vetting his equipment. If he's selling it, it is safe, and you don't have to worry about it. The swords will be correct. The arm will be correct. He's made sure it's good before it ever ends up in anyone else's hands. So he's pretty much my go-to guy here in the United States. Like I said, sometime soon he has a large shipment of helmets showing up, and there should be some very affordable helmets on the market.
Tasha, on that topic, is there a clearinghouse site for sharing links to the appropriate equipment for this? If somebody wants to get into it, is there a place they can go as a one-stop shop in terms of identifying the right gear that you would need? Whether you're brand new or whether you'd be pivoting from heavy or from a fencing world where you have some background in gear, but might need to upgrade. Like, for instance, I have heavy fighting gear, but I'm certain it's not up to standards for doing steel fighting. Also, related to that, a second question is, ballpark, what do you imagine the introductory cost would be for a new fighter to get a set of gear that would work for this?
So that's kind of all over the map. I've got right now up a list, which I'm going to be making available in general. It's a Google Doc, so I'm just going to send a list out via Google Doc with the link. And these are armors that are known to be pretty good. It's based off of a site from Reddit. I've updated that. There were a lot of dead links on that. So the links that I have here are all correct. And for example, Greater the Slow, he's got the best gauntlets in the business. You're going to spend $1,300 to buy those gauntlets, and you'll wait a year to get them. They're worth it, but that's the high end. You can also get gauntlets around $200 that are acceptable. I would spend about $300 for gauntlets, because gauntlets are, they're your hands. You need to take care of them. They tend to be one of the more expensive items. Your helmet is going to be running in the $200 to $700 range. The ones Nadler is bringing in are going to be in the $200 range. So I've got on this listing, as you can see, a large number of armors. Most of them are in Ukraine and in Russia. So what I've done is at the very top, these are the armors that are here in the United States. For example, Ironmonger Armory, they're here in Maryland. You can look them up online and they'll have stuff for you. They're making it on the spot, so it'll take a month or two, but they'll make it. They're making kind of munitions grade gear, but it's very, very affordable. Anshelm Arms makes a pretty high-end helmet, stainless steel. It will cost you a decent amount of money, but they're high-end pieces of equipment for both SCA fighting and for steel fighting. He knows what the rules are for steel fighting, so he knows how to make a steel fighting helmet. Same with Ironmonger Armory. We have gotten a lot of good helmets out of Ironmonger Armory for relatively low costs. I'm trying to remember how much Trey's was, but it was somewhere in the area of under $300. Am I right, Alric?
I think that's about right.
And that was for a very heavy-duty kettle helmet that's still out there, still being used. So it's survived, what, 5 years of combat now? That's pretty good. And then most of the other on this list are literally Facebook. You go to Facebook, you see something you like, you message the person, they basically give you a price. It's very and then hopefully it'll show up in your door in a few months. I do have to caution you. There are some trusted armors in Ukraine, and then there are armors all over Facebook where it'll be a year till you see this stuff. And then customs makes a difference. We have learned that if you're shipping a sword through the mail, your entire package will be delayed. You don't want to ship a sword with your armor because that sword is now, it's a weapon. Therefore, it delays the entire shipment substantially. So, like I said, I'll be posting this later. These are all people that are considered good armors. Andrei Galvarevsky, if you go on Facebook, you'll see he's an amazing armorer. There are some amazing equipment out there. And because it's in Ukraine, Poland, or Russia, the prices are actually pretty low compared to the United States. That said, you really just cannot, I know I'm kind of pushing it, but you can't go wrong with Nadler. His equipment is absolutely top of the line. He's sometimes reselling, for example, Age of Craft equipment, but he's got it in stock. It'll be in your house in 1 week. He's got it in multiple sizes, and you don't have to go through the shipping or how to do, for example, most Ukrainian armors can't do PayPal. Western Union has been difficult. Just paying a Ukrainian armor is a bit of a pain. So again, I'm a big fan of Nadler right now.
I know I got my gauntlets from Nadler, and I really love them. I think they were 500, but just to find something that fit was just like, this is great. And they were there in like a week.
Yeah, while we were sitting here doing this, I just ordered my Sabatons. That's how easy a site is.
$99. How could you not? I was looking at them too. They didn't have my size. My size was sold out before I saw it. And I've got Sabatons, but I'm still thinking, wow, I need to buy those. So anybody else? I think we're done. So I'm going to ask, just because we're going to be doing some of this in the future, for someone who's not normally doing this, did this presentation work for you?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. And Roy, you're in Maryland. Where in Maryland are you?
I'm in Laurel.
Very cool. I'm in Frederick myself. So whenever anything, and Alric is very close by also, so is Jim. When things start back up again, you'll have Pels.
I'll be a Pel too, but we'll take as good as I get, I promise.
Excellent.
Awesome.
All right, everybody. Time to enjoy the rest of the day, I think.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.